This is the head at the 6th week. Let's make a transverse section. And this is the ventral view of the palate. At the end of the 5th week, merged nasal prominences not only grow downward to form philtrum, but also grow toward the stomodium, forming a prominence toward the stomodium. This is the primary palate, one primordium of the palate, caused by the proliferation of mesenchyme developed from the deeper part of the merged nasal prominences. According to the location, the primary palate is also called median palatal process. It's wedge-shaped and forms only a small part of the hard palate, anterior to the incisive fossa. As the 6th week, secondary palate appears. There are two shelf-like outgrowths from the maxillary prominences. According to the location, the secondary palate is also called lateral palatal process. I'll take a frontal section through the head of the 6th week embryo, and here shows the frontal section of the palate. Initially, they are directed obliquely downward on each side of the tongue. As the jaws develop, the tongue becomes relatively smaller and moves inferiorly. In the 7th week, the palatine shelves ascend to a horizontal position above the tongue. Gradually, these two secondary palates approach each other and fuse in the median plane. They also fuse with the posterior part of wedge-shaped primary palate. The incisive fossa is the midline landmark between the primary palate and the secondary palate. Bone gradually develops in the palatine shelves and forms a hard palate. However, the posterior parts of the secondary palate don't become ossified and form the soft palate. If these three primordia can't fuse with each other, what will happen? Cleft palate will form. Cleft palate is one common palatine malformation caused by the failure of palatine prominences to meet and fuse with each other. It can be unilateral or bilateral. The most serious one is the last one. The cleft extends through the soft and hard regions of the palate to the upper jaw, even to the upper lip. These defects can be corrected by the operation. Palatogenesis begins at the end of the 5th week. However, development of the palate is not completed until the 12th week. The most critical period of development of palate is from the end of the 6th week until the beginning of the 9th week. During this critical period, if pregnant women exposed to the drugs or toxins or other teratogens such as alcohol, X-rays, the normal development of the palate is easily to be interfered, causing cleft palate. At the same time as the palatine shelves fuse, please look at here. The nasal septum grows down. And here shows the nasal septum formed by the proliferation of mesenchyme developed from the merged medial nasal prominences and frontal nasal prominence. It grows toward the future palatine region and finally fuses with the palatine shelves. Initially, primitive nasal cavity is connected with the stomodium. It's the formation of the definitive palate that separates the stomodium from the primitive nasal cavity. After formation of the definitive palate, the primitive nasal cavity is renamed as definitive nasal cavity, and the stomodium is renamed as oral cavity. This is the development of the palate and the clinical correlations. Now have a quiz. Which bronchial arch is associated with the cleft palate? Please make your choice. Thanks for listening. See you next time.